esta primeira sessão com comunicações que têm a ver com projetos que estão em curso ou que já terminaram e que envolvem conventos e mosteiros, a sua história e o seu património. A primeira comunicação será apresentada pelas professoras Janet Burton, da University of Wales Trinity St. David Lampeter, e Karen Stöber, da Universidade de Lleida, Catalunha. Ambas dirigem o projeto Monastic Wales e trata-se, como vão ouvir, de um projeto de larga escala, cujo objetivo se centra no estabelecimento da história monástica do país de Gales, de forma a melhor identificar e conhecer o lugar da vida religiosa regular medieval galesa no mapa religioso da Europa. A comunicação será naturalmente em inglês e por isso eu passo a exprimirme nessa língua. Yes, I'm seeing Professor Janet Burton and Professor Karen Stöber. I don't know which of you will be the first to speak, and I give you my greetings on behalf of the CONVEMOS project, and it is my great pleasure to give you the floor for your presentation of the Monastic Wales project. As it was mentioned in our invitation to you, Monastic Wales stands as a valued and referential project involving religious orders and their institutions, and it will be to all attendees a unique occasion to learn more about it. Shall I give you the floor? I don't know who is going to start.
I'm going to start. It's Janet.
Thank you very much.
And so I'll just, I hope you can see the slideshow here. I'm just going to begin that now. Well, first of all, can I thank you all for your welcome and for your invitation. It's very good to be here to share Monastic Wales with you. I'm going to say a few words about the origin of the project, and then I'll hand over to Karen to demonstrate the website. Well, the project had its origins some 13 years ago in 2008. It's sometimes hard to imagine that we've been working on this now for as long as we have. And it seemed to us that although there was at that time already a considerable body of scholarship on Welsh monastic history, there was room for a fresh approach. Yes, there were plenty of publications, but they tended to be rather incomplete and to concentrate on certain orders, notably the Cistercians, a very strong and powerful presence within Wales, and also on certain periods, so perhaps a concentration on the era of foundation. So it seemed to us that there was place for a project that would work towards a comprehensive history of monastic and religious houses of Wales, which would also address some of the new agendas and new questions on monastic history. And secondly, we thought there was certainly room for a project which would take a new interdisciplinary approach, bringing together the work of scholars past and present in the disciplines of history, and Karen and I are both historians, but not just history, but archaeology, literature, visual and material culture, and manuscript studies. And as we formulated our ideas, we realised that there was quite a body of scholars within Wales at the Welsh universities, the National Library of Wales, the Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies, that would form a good team, as well as looking outside Wales itself. I just show you here the homepage of the website, which Karen will be talking about later. Well, alongside this agenda of sort of perhaps what we might say traditional scholarly research, we envisaged the creation of a website which would allow us to disseminate the fruits of our research to a wider public. So we intended that the website would be there as a resource for teaching and learning, as well as research, for students, for use in schools, and for those with a general interest in historic sites. So we were hoping really to feed into heritage and into cultural tourism. I should say, as in many places, there is in the UK a very high profile for impact. The impact agenda is very important. In all our research now, we are told to have in our mind all the time the non-academic beneficiaries of research. So I think the first question that I'd like to raise is, why Wales? Why did we choose a project that we were calling Monastic Wales? Well, a simple answer is that in 2008, Karen and I were both living in Wales, about 25 miles apart. Karen was then at the university in Aberystwyth, and I still am, at the University of Wales at Trinity St David in Lampeter. So we felt very engaged with our own locality and anxious really to develop our research into its heritage. But I think we need to push ourselves a little bit more to ask about why Wales. First of all, was there a medieval idea of Wales? Or in using monastic Wales, are we talking about Wales as a fairly modern concept? Further, was monasticism in Wales in any way distinctive? Was there any justification for basing a project in Wales in terms of it being distinctive, rather different to other regions? Well, we have to say that in order to place the development of monasticism in Wales in its context, it's crucial to know something of the relationship between Wales and its more powerful neighbour, England. Well, England and Wales today, even though we're part of the UK, are quite distinctive. They are areas with their own cultural traditions, and in many parts of Wales, its own language. Now, before the late 11th century, England and Wales were distinct entities, and as I just said, in many ways they have remained so. England developed in the 10th century from an ever decreasing number of independent kingdoms. So we see the gradual coalescence of different kingdoms into one. What we know now as Wales was divided into several kingdoms or principalities that remained long after the Kingdom of England had stabilised. What you're seeing on the slide now to the right is a photograph of Offa's Dyke, and you can see Offa's Dyke marked in red on the map to the left here. That was an 8th century defensive earthwork built by the king of one of the English kingdoms to mark the boundary between his kingdom and Wales. And that remained a border throughout the Middle Ages. So it was visible. The boundary between England and Wales was visible, but it's important to remember that this, in a sense, is a political border, but the border itself was not always marked by conflict or by defence. There was plenty of cultural interchange on both sides. But I think the main point here is to look at that border and see to the east a strong political state and a strong monarchy, and to the west, Wales, which remained fragmented into different polities, and there was often periods of conflict among those native kingdoms or principalities. Now we can see Offa's Dyke again here to the right, which gives you some sense of the topography of part of the Welsh border. But it's quite ironic that most of us now call the country that we are talking about Wales, as in Monastic Wales. Welsh speakers would not use that word to describe their country. Wales to native Welsh speakers is Cymru. A Welsh man is Cymraeg, and a Welsh woman Cymraeg. So those are the words that are used within Wales, within Welsh-speaking Wales. And Wales or Welsh, those words themselves derive from an Old English word, Walisg, foreigner. So to the English, the Welsh on the west side of Offa's Dyke were the foreigners. And the word we use for Wales today perpetuates that perception. Now I'm showing you here a map of Wales in the late 11th century. And I should note here that our project Monastic Wales begins in the late 11th century with the coming of the Normans. It doesn't cover in detail the monasteries, the early medieval monasteries of Wales. So we don't have sites for the monasteries of Wales in the early Middle Ages. And this decision was made early for a number of reasons. First of all, the monasteries of early medieval Wales were quite different, very distinctive from their medieval counterparts. And it's sometimes very difficult in relation to the early Middle Ages to define exactly what a monastery was. So we felt that we were dealing really with two different and quite distinctive concepts of a monastery. The other reason was much, much more pragmatic, and that is in the course of this project, we've had very, very limited funding. So in a sense, and this is something that Karen will talk a little bit more about in a few moments, we made sure we had the potential for expanding the site, but to begin with, we limited ourselves to monasticism as it developed in Wales from the late 11th century onwards. There is a link, however, between the early period and post-11th century in that where we can, we are linking monastic sites to early medieval ones. I'm talking here about the monasteries which were quite deliberately established on sites of much earlier religious and cultural significance. So there we have an illustration of something I mentioned a few moments ago, and that is the fragmentation of Wales into different polities, different kingdoms, different principalities. So as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. And the boundaries we can think of as being reasonably fluid as the relationship among these polities changed and developed. But from the late 11th century, in fact, within a few years of William of Normandy's conquest of England, the Normans began to push westward. And we get a push here in the south, across the south coast of Wales, another infiltration coming from the north, and another across and down through central Wales. So gradually we get the establishment of Norman power bases along the south and the east side of Wales. And this becomes known as the Welsh March. So from the late 11th century, we get two distinctive areas of Wales: the Welsh March, or Marchia Walia, the areas under Norman control, and Pura Walia, which is the north, the central part of Wales, which remains under the control, the rulership of native Welsh rulers, as opposed to Norman incomers. And this is very important for us to recognise if we're to understand the pattern of monastic foundation that took place in the late 11th century and throughout the 12th and into the 13th. We have Benedictine houses that are located at reasonably regular intervals across the south of Wales. And these are Norman foundations. They're founded by Norman incomers and often very closely linked to, as daughter houses, to mother houses in Normandy, in France, and indeed in England. And right through their history, this was a really very, very important factor in determining both their own identity and how they flourished or failed to flourish within their local context. The area marked in green on this map is Marchia Walia, the Welsh March, largely out of the political control of the native Welsh themselves. The area in grey and yellow are the areas that remained until the late 13th century under native Welsh rule. Pura Walia. And it's the rulers of Pura Walia that become the patrons of the Cistercians and the Augustinians. So they themselves are important monastic founders and patrons, but there are political and social and cultural and ethnic reasons behind the nature of their monastic patronage, the orders that they choose to found and that they choose to back. And I should say, perhaps move back just one slide, that the area marked in grey here, Deheubarth, is the native principality that is perhaps the dominant political force in the second half of the 12th century. And this area marked in yellow here, Gwynedd up in the north, which is the major political authority and influence in the 13th century. And these are some of the key players. The lords of Deheubarth and Gwynedd, the third marked there, Llywelyn ap Gruffydd ap Iorwerth, Llywelyn the last native Welsh prince of Wales. And these are some of the big actors in our story of monastic Wales. Well, it's the defeat of Gwynedd by the English under Edward I that marked the end of independent Wales. The areas, the parts of Wales that we've just seen, previously ruled by native Welsh princes, became the Principality of Wales under the English crown, while in the March, the border barons continued to cement their power. So the significance of this for Monastic Wales is that we are now looking at how the abbots and priors of Welsh houses with Welsh personnel accommodated to a new political regime, how they adapted to living under a different political regime and indeed a different legal one as well. So Wales offers the opportunity to study monasticism in a society that was divided in terms of politics, legal systems, social customs, language and culture, and to assess the interaction of the monastic orders in both the political ambitions of the Welsh rulers and then to the readjustment to the processes of conquest and colonization. And it's here I'm going to pass over to Karen.
Thank you. Janet, will you just carry on moving the screen forward? That might be easier since you've got it up.
That's fine. If you can just give me a nod if I don't move it on in the right.
Okay. Right. So if you could move on to the first slide. But actually, I don't know if can you see my cursor moving? Maybe not because.
I'll move on, Karen, if you just tell me where.
Okay, great. Okay. So yes. First of all, I also would like to thank you very much indeed for the invitation and for the opportunity to share with you in Portugal something we're doing in cold, rainy Wales. And I think you will see that there are probably a lot of things that that we have in common and that will give us a lot of opportunity for conversation in the future. Now, what you see here in front of us is the homepage of our project website. I will talk you a little bit through the website, and we will be doing this on the basis of screenshots on this occasion. Now, as Janet mentioned, when we first talked about this project back in the old days, our idea was really to create a concise monastic history of Wales. Janet has given you the reasons for that. Now, as it was the opportunity to develop another part of the project, which had not originally been our aim to do this first, that is the website, came in fact earlier than we had anticipated, thanks to a modest grant we received towards the design of a database and website. So we changed our plans a little bit and decided to start with the website. So here you have the website. Our financial resources, and it is worth stressing that the grants we received for the development of this project and the website were modest throughout. So we've not received big money for this. So everything you see here has been done really on a limited budget. Our financial resources were augmented by another modest grant from the Mark Fitch Fund, which allowed the employment of a part-time researcher, Dr. Julie Kerr, a medieval monastic historian based in Scotland, whose work includes an important study of medieval monastic hospitality. And we were indeed fortunate to secure Julie's services, not least because she had previously been employed on a pioneering web-based project, which at the time, I mean, now you have lots of these projects, but at the time there weren't really that many of them. And she was one of the people behind a project called the Cistercians in Yorkshire, which was based at Sheffield University in Northern England, and which proved, in fact, to be a useful model to follow for our own project. Now, we made the decision to launch the website in Lampeter, where Janet was based at the time, and in Aberystwyth, where I was based, in October 2009, after less than a year of developing the project. And although by that stage, only a few sites had been completed. So the website was really very much a building site still, but we decided to launch it anyway. And in some ways, the decision to go public at such an early stage was a brave, you might say a foolhardy one. But from the beginning, we aimed to encourage public participation and dialogue. So we thought if we start the webpage early, you know, we have input, you know, perhaps from people from a very early stage. We have been very pleased, in fact, at the number of individuals who have contacted our project email. And Janet, if you could just put the cursor up to the contact us sign, that's the contact us button. If you click there, you can contact the project, and the emails will go to Janet and myself, and we will then respond to those. So a lot of people, we were pleased to note, used this function and did contact us, either to ask for advice or to draw our attention to publications or to local projects, which we may not have been aware of. So this has been a very useful way of communicating with the public. We have also given countless talks to local history societies. We have aimed really from the start to take Monastic Wales around the country to make people aware of it, because there is, as Janet mentioned, this important element of impact. So, you know, we're trying to get people, the wider public, to use and be aware of the website. So we've given countless talks to local history societies up and down Wales, and this has stimulated the use of the website. You can always see that from the statistics. When one of us gives a talk, users of the website goes up, and it has also facilitated public interaction. And notably during the lockdown of last year, during the COVID, the first lockdown, we did a number of virtual presentations across Wales that were very well attended indeed. We have also presented Monastic Wales abroad, for example, in Spain, in the Czech Republic, in Germany, in Poland, and so on. The project has also provided a useful focus for postgraduate students, and that's an important aspect again of the project. And Janet mentioned the use of the website as a teaching tool. So far, 3 postgraduate research students have completed theses, which have grown directly from their desire to be a part of Monastic Wales. So you see here the titles of these theses. One took as its focus a short-lived Cistercian abbey in South Wales. The second focused on 2 Welsh cluniac houses, which formed part of a wider study of that congregation in England and Wales. And the third was inspired by the question of what happened to monastic lands after the dissolution. And it deals with questions of continuity and change. And as you see from the title here, it ended up focusing on the Cistercian Abbey of Strata Florida and one of its granges. So these theses have also fed into the website. So that's a little bit of further background on the website. We go back to the, or forward to the homepage now. Thank you. So what of the website then, and its limitations and future possibilities? For this presentation, we're using screenshots of the website to give you a sense of what the website looks like, and just to avoid any technical hitches in case the connection isn't strong enough in either of our homes. We invite you all, however, to visit the website and browse at your leisure. We should just advise you that at the moment we are updating the website, and as you probably know, when one updates things, there are normally little hitches. So over the next few days or weeks, you may find that some page or other, or some link is not working properly. We're dealing with this, and we're hoping to have this all fixed by next month. So on the website, as you can see on this screenshot, we currently have 60 monasteries of one kind or another. And as of now, we think we can say that this stage of the website is complete. Though it is in the nature of this type of project, of course, as you probably know from your own experience, that it can be added to endlessly. As Janet mentioned, the earlier monasteries earlier in her presentation. So, you know, that's something we're still hoping to do at some stage in the not too far away future. The website is also being updated regularly. So this is the list of the map of houses and the list of monastic sites in the database. As you see, 60 houses, that is manageable. So this was actually something we could really pursue the research of these 60 houses in some detail. So this is doable in a place that's kind of small and contained enough, like Wales. So all of these houses, when you go up and down the list on the right-hand side, this takes you to individual sites of houses. You can find them then with numbers on the map. And just to explain a couple of other features on the home page before I move on. This is the home page. We have now on the left-hand side a range of buttons. You have under the next point, there's the project team, which lists ourselves as directors and our collaborators. Project news, which is something we aim to update regularly, where we post news of talks we give, publications, completed thesis, and so forth. Future plans, we just mentioned the early monasteries, contact us I've already mentioned. And then we have further down a list of other features, which I will explain on the basis of one example. Right, so I'm quite aware of time passing, so I will move on. To give you an idea of how to use the website, we will show just one example from the website. So if we go to browse list of orders, there on the left-hand side, you get a list of all the orders that are were present in Wales in the Middle Ages. Now, from this, you see the Augustinian Cannons, the Friars, the Benedictines, the Cistercians, the Cluniacs, and so forth. So as I say, do please go back and visit the website and have a good nosy around. We will go on to the Augustinian Cannons, just as an example. And here you have the screen that you get when you click on the order Augustinian Cannons. And you see here the list of the 9 Augustinian houses, and you see them also on the map. That's the 9 Augustinian houses in Wales. You have a little list there of related articles and bibliographical sources, which we are adding to as we go along. Now, if you go on to the next slide, you see here 3 examples of Augustinian houses in North Wales. Now, the distribution of the Augustinian houses in Wales is interesting. As you saw on the map, we've got 5 houses grouped together in the north, and the remaining 4 are all in the south. Now, I will say a little bit more about this in a second. Now, the reason why we've chosen the Augustinians here as an example is, on the one hand, because, as Janet has said earlier, everybody, when they talk about Welsh monasteries, used to talk about the Cistercians because they have the nicest ruins and the biggest body of work. So this is one reason to look at something that's not quite as represented in scholarship. And also because it's a very interesting example. And now I'm kind of referring back to things that Janet talked about a moment ago. The regular canons, the Augustinian canons, were not the most numerous order in Wales, and their monasteries tended to be small, both in size and also in number of brethren. But they do represent a particularly interesting example because of the ways in which they became involved with medieval Welsh society on several levels. Now, in the north, we've seen that this group of 5 monasteries in the north, their priories were predominantly associated with the princes of Gwynedd. So they sort of were very much associated with native Welsh patrons and benefactors. And in the south, on the other hand, with the Anglo-Norman lords of South Wales, again, going back to the maps and the sort of division that Janet showed earlier. Through their lay patrons and benefactors, these religious houses were drawn into the life and politics beyond their cloister walls. And they really became involved really quite in many ways in the life of medieval Wales. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we have chosen here the Priory of Penmon on Anglesey in northern Wales. I'm not going to talk about the history of the monastery now. What my interest is here to show you the website and what the website looks like and what you can do with a religious house like Penmon. So the aim in our website was for a fairly clean page with not too much information for the user who perhaps just wants to have a little visit to the website and just wants a brief description of the monastery. I mean, not everybody wants to know all the details. So what you see on this page, you see here a brief description under the name of the monastery. You see details here of the medieval diocese, an affiliation, if there is one, the lordship at foundation, which was Gwynedd in the north, the kingdom of Gwynedd, which Janet mentioned, access, which is practical visit information for people who want to visit the site today. So is it in private hands? Is it public? Can you visit it or not? Who is it owned by? In this case, the ruins are in the guardianship of Cadw, which is the Welsh heritage body. And so we have this information for every site. The next are the main events in the history of this particular monastery. So you can see in this case, we only have two main events, foundation and the dissolution. If you're a casual visitor to Penmon, maybe that's all you want to know. So perhaps you don't need to have much more information. So the place where the monastery was founded around 1220, and it was dissolved around 1537. Further down, you have a list of people associated with the site. You have, again, bibliographical resources specific to this particular site, and archival resources, related articles, and further down, some images, and we will get there in a moment. Now, those people who want to know a little bit more about the monastery, Janet, can just click on show minor events. And as you see here in gray, a little bit less, more sort of shaded than the main events, you see a whole list, in this case, 12 minor events, confirmations of grants, destruction by, in this case, English troops, visitation, a fine the monastery had to pay, and so forth. And in each case, we give bibliographical and archival references as appropriate. So if you are interested in knowing more about the monastery, you just go and click on show minor events. And as you see in brackets after every entry, it shows two sources, one source, one archive, and so on. So you can follow this further and get more information and more references to the information that we're giving you here on this side. Okay, so if we move on to the next page, we also have a section of people associated with the site, be they patrons, benefactors, priors, as in this case, and you can click on all of these, on each of these names. And well, we can't do this here because it's a screenshot, but you can click on these names and you will get, again, information on these individuals. So, you know, this kind of goes on and on. The site kind of unfolds according really to your interests and the time you have on your hands. You can spend a lot of time here looking at individual people and so forth. You see, again, the bibliographical sources here a little bit bigger, the archival sources, the articles on the website, the related articles on Monastic Wales that are actually published on the website. And Janet, another slide, please. Sorry. I haven't got the PowerPoint open in front of me. So as I said earlier, when you click on individual people associated with the site, you get we have here the example of Llywelyn ap Iorwerth, Llywelyn Fawr, Llywelyn the Great, Prince of Wynnes, who died in 1240 and who was one of the patrons, of the site. And there's some more information about him here. Here we are, just one example of what happens when you click on one of the people. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, we have at the bottom of the page, we have images. Now, we do not always have images because in some cases there's literally nothing left of the former monastery at all. I mean, there's in one case there's a car park now or a chip shop. So where there's nothing left at all, we haven't included images, obviously. But wherever we can, we include images which we take ourselves and which students or colleagues or well-meaning people send to us. So this is a range of images from the inside and outside of Penmont Priory. Right, so this in a nutshell is the website. As I say, you can go on and on exploring individual features of this, but the main page is fairly clear, fairly tidy, easy to manage, and our technician who set up the site for us, he was very keen to have it that way, because it's often you visit websites and it's difficult to make them work because there's too much information. He also, when he designed the website, he included several features. The website is what you see, but the database is of course much bigger. So there is a feature there we can, when we do want to go bilingual and have a Welsh version of the website, which we hope to do at some point, we can do that. It's in place. We just need to fill the pages in the database. And similarly, if we want to expand and add further religious houses, we can also do that. So we just need to then kind of go further with that. It's all there. Right, just quickly to conclude, the website, there's more to the Monastic Wales project than the website. As we said in the beginning, our aim really was to publish a monastic history of Wales. We did the website first for the reasons I explained, but the project has resulted in 2 books, here we are, and numerous articles. Now you have here the covers of those 2 books. The first of these books, published in 2013 by the University of Wales Press, is an edited collection, edited by Janet and myself, essays by historians, archaeologists, and scholars of literature and manuscript studies. And when we submitted our proposal to the University of Wales Press, they said, oh yeah, this is a good idea. Why don't you do 2 books? And they commissioned effectively a more popular book, which is what you see here on the right, Abbeys and Priories of Medieval Wales, also published by the University of Wales Press in 2015 and reprinted in 2015, which is really a guidebook to the monasteries of medieval Wales. It has an introduction to religious orders, and then it has a gazetteer. It has a little article on each of those 60 religious houses. It's very much based on the website, very much linked to the website. And it is intended for a largely non-academic audience. Now, in investigating monasteries in divided societies, what we are doing in Wales really invites comparison with other areas in Europe. And one of the other things we do, and this is just the last thing I'm going to say, is that in 2011, we held our first workshop in Lampeter with colleagues from Dublin, Belfast and Cork, with a view to establishing comparative and collaborative research on Wales and Ireland. And I'm delighted to say that one of the outcomes of this meeting was that colleagues in Ireland, led by Dr. Edel Vrenach of the Discovery Programme in Dublin, were successful in attracting funding for a Monastic Ireland website. So Monastic Ireland is out there as well. It's a very, very good website, and I recommend that you visit that as well. and it uses Monastic Wales as its template and duly acknowledges Monastic Wales as its inspiration. We have also established contacts in Catalonia through myself. I'm now based in Catalonia, and in Prague through our collaborator Anna Müller, who was formerly of the Forwok in Dresden, and more recently also with the University of Constance through Gabriela Signori and in Poland. Now, those of us working within Wales were anxious really to develop a dialogue with historians, archaeologists, literary scholars, art and architectural historians, and manuscript specialists across areas of Europe that seem to present analogies with the situation in Wales. So aspirant states in the shadow of bigger polities. So England, Wales here being the example. With funding from the European Science Foundation, we held another workshop under the auspices of the Monastic Wales project in Eichstätt in Bavaria in 2013, which brought together scholars from the UK, Scandinavia, Hungary, Austria, Spain, Romania, and the Czech Republic to open the dialogue and to explore avenues for the future exchange of ideas. So placing Wales in its European and not just its British context remains an aspiration of the project. And therefore, we're very interested in keeping in touch with your project on Portuguese monasteries. And sorry, I've overrun a little bit, and thank you for your time.